Afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, network members. I'm Pascal Leone, the Executive Director of the Supportive Housing Network of New York. And on behalf of the network team, we're pleased to offer this NetWorkshop on the OMH Medicaid Rehabilitative and Tenancy support services, so our members can be fully informed on their decision on whether to participate in this voluntary program that I think sign up is by November 30th in less than 2 weeks. And so I just want to personally thank the staff at OMH who've been on this virtual roadshow for a bit, putting on presentations, answering questions, and updating the FAQs as they go. I'd also like to extend my thanks to our 100 members who registered and sent in a lot of thoughtful questions that really helped inform today's presentation. And so just quickly, today's presentation will provide some guidance on the state plan amendment to pursue Medicaid reimbursement for the rehabilitative and tenancy support services for OMH funded supportive housing programs. And so we look forward to having a high level kind of conversation on what the services are, but really getting to the practical implementation of like the monthly reporting of cares, accessing the LPHAs, and we'll leave substantial time for Q&A. And so before I turn it over to Emil, who will probably share their screen, just some quick housekeeping items. Yes, today's webinar will be recorded and a recording will be made available to those who registered. And then also we'll have substantial time for Q&A. And so feel free to put your questions in the chat. My colleagues, Joelle and Ashanti, will be monitoring the chat. And, I'll leave it up to the OMH folks if they want to answer some burning questions in between or any clarifying questions, but really saving a bulk of the questions towards the end. And so with that, I'm happy to turn it over to you, Emil.
That's great. That was a great framing. We really appreciate you arranging this. And I think that was a great overview. We will try to go through the presentation that we've done, the WebEx, really quickly, and we will save a full hour. So I like the way you framed it. We want to save a full hour for the questions and the exchange and make sure that people understand all the mechanics of this and the choice. So we're going to go really fast through our presentation. Some of you may have attended the WebEx or other, and we don't want to be repetitive or slow. So we're going to go fast. We'll try to answer some of the questions we have, and we'll leave a full hour at the end. So, Pascal, I could share my screen? That's great. Okay. Sorry, let's do this slideshow from the beginning. Okay, we're gonna go really fast at a steady pace here, but this is really all the materials that are out there, and we're very excited to have this opportunity finally start. We've been working on this for a long time, but what this really represents is New York State. We have a state plan in place that allows us to bill for support services that are being provided in supportive housing settings. This is something that New York has done. We've been a leader in supportive housing and funding this through contracts, funding these services and supports as with you, our partners. And we want to start drawing down Medicaid for any services that are eligible for Medicaid individuals so that we can invest back in these programs. So this is an exciting opportunity to start billing for some of these tenancy supports. We've had a lot of dialogue, and we thank Shinny and ACL for really being leaders in that area, ensuring that the state got strong feedback that the way we did this had to be very responsible, couldn't destabilize programs, couldn't change the nature of these programs. So really what we're trying to do is really bill for services that are happening, get data from providers, and a key element of this implementation is we've designed this so that it's voluntary. Providers can choose whether or not to participate in this program. And if you are participating in this program, these extra dollars that we're able to draw down by now getting a federal share for eligible supports to eligible individuals, we're going to be investing back in the program. So we've done our increases in the budget to increase stipends, but we want to increase further with these revenues. And so we have an opportunity here, and it's provider choice to get an increase in the amount per unit downstate, as well as the amount per unit upstate if you choose to participate in this program. And as Pascal said, we're looking for people to get back to us in November if you're considering participation. And as we said, this is the choice, but if you do participate in the program, we're going to be doing contract increases of $1,200 in January, and $600 for downstate and $600 per unit upstate. And we'll talk about what your obligation is. But really the three key things that you'll need to do is once you tell us your intent to participate, we're going to be working on the contract amendments. We strongly encourage every provider to consider participating. We want to invest these resources here. And what you would have to do starting in 2023 is to start reporting monthly services data in CARES. So we, in this presentation today, in this first half of the presentation before the questions, we will show you the CARES screens, and we tried to design this in a way so that it's simple to use and easy to submit. And we're really just trying to collect the current services that you're providing and not trying to change anything that you're doing. And at the same time, the other dimensions we'll need is really a plan to help with the licensed practitioner of the healing art recommendations. And if your agency does not have any licensed practitioners in the agency to do those recommendations, those assessments, that's okay. OMH will show you how we're setting up a process to help get you access to that, and we're paying the cost of that. So the good news is that shouldn't be a barrier for any supported housing program that wants to participate, wants to submit the monthly CARES data. We will help you with the licensed practitioner of the healing arts recommendations. We will also help with provider enrollment in Medicaid if that needs to be done. So right now, it's a little bit of a gray area. Initially, we were informed that providers would have to enroll in Medicaid. Now that's not a very cumbersome process. It's literally just getting on record that you're a provider that provides Medicaid services. And so it's filling out a simple registration sheet. In this case, the state is the entity billing for the Medicaid services. You are our subcontractors, and we're the ones submitting the claim subject to the audit risk. Our most recent insight from DOH is that this step may not even be necessary because you're a subcontractor. So we're still working on clarity for that. What I would say for now is, number one, it's enrolling Medicaid is a very simple process, but at this point, you don't necessarily have to do that to participate in this. The big requirement that you're going to have to do to participate in this is to submit data in CARES. So if you're currently in a Medicaid program, this third potential step is not even relevant because you're already enrolled in the Medicaid program. But we will get the answers on that down the road, but it'll probably be well after our launch of this. So the big thing that you're evaluating is this reporting in CARES and the additional work that you may have to do to get this data to OMH on a regular basis in CARES. But we believe the data already exists. Consistent with our housing guidelines, you need to have a service plan. You need to keep track of when you're doing supports for clients. A key principle in this is we wanted to make this implementation voluntary because we didn't want to change the nature of your work in any way. And then a second principle is, we wanted the state to administer the actual claim, to take the risk. We didn't want to do what normally happens when a service becomes eligible for Medicaid. You cut a state contract dollar, and then you assume a provider is going to be able to bill for the Medicaid service and keep this program viable. What's happening here is we want to invest in these programs. So we're keeping the stability of the contract. We've added money in this budget. Now there's an opportunity to add more through these revenues, and the state will be submitting the claim and taking on the risk. So basically, the decision that you have to make and the workload that rests on any providers choosing to participate is really the CARES reporting and working with the state on the recommendations. So every 3 years, an individual receiving these services needs to be evaluated based on their medical record, on whether or not they need tenancy supports to live independently in supported housing. So We've already done a webinar. Some of you may have attended. I'm going to start going a little bit quicker through all the technical content because I think from the questions Shinny shared up front, I so appreciate that. I know the challenges you're trying to understand what all these things mean, all this information we're sharing. So I'm going to go very quickly. So this was a state plan that was approved 2 years ago. And it basically includes a range of services, which are really the supports that we currently do in this program. But we shared copies of the supported housing SPA. The CARES reporting is going to be based on that framework. And I'll go a little bit further into the types of services. But any provider that chooses to participate in the program will have to submit us monthly data electronically through CARES. And then OMH will do these contract increases to help in that effort and to invest in these programs. So we're implementing this because we're a leader in supported housing and we want to put money back in. So if these services are eligible for Medicaid, we think it's important that the state pursue reimbursement here. That's why we submitted the SPA. And the exciting part is that we have money in this budget to start to seed implementation and a commitment that these dollars will be reinvested back in. So there's really when you look at the services, there's two major categories. There's community integration and skill building, and then there's stabilization services. And the descriptions have a whole bunch of examples on, what that really means. We could talk about that further in the questions if you have it. But, the guidelines have been updated to use language more similar to the approved state plan. And those are on our website. They're in the package that we sent out. And for us, what we want to make sure people understand is if you participate and you submit monthly data in CARES, we will permanently increase your state aid contracts for downstate. So in New York City, Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Putnam, Rockland, we will increase it on a recurring basis by $12,000 per unit. And for upstate, we will increase it by $600 per unit. What we're working on doing, and we'll do updates to our FAQs, we're going to release the full amount of those funds in January. So we're going to release the full amount up front in January, and then in the subsequent fiscal year, I think our current plan is starting in April, we will then reflect those increases permanently on a recurring basis. So we are ready to move forward with those increases in January. We just need to know who is going to participate and work with us to get done the recommendations, either through the OMH process with the BHCCs or potentially using an LPHA through your organization or contracted by your organization. That's your choice to make. We just ask that you work with us on that and you have a path for that. And then we need to start in 2023 implementing CARES reporting. And the way that we've been explaining it is we're looking for a good faith effort on the part of the providers. So if you raise your hand and say, I'm ready to start reporting, I am going to do this work. I want the contract increase. We're looking that you start moving forward in 2023, start submitting data as early as possible. And by the end of 2023, we want to make sure we have all the recommendations done and we have the data coming in a regular basis. One comment, I've heard a lot of questions of people ask, what is a good faith effort? I think there's going to be some variation, in the field on what it's going to take to get this done. Some agencies have licensed practitioners and they'll be able to get recommendations done sooner. Some people have different service and reporting systems and they'll be able to start entering CARES data in a more comprehensive way sooner. That's good. That's okay. There's an incentive on behalf of the field to start getting data so that we can bill and invest in these programs more. And at the same time, the increases that we're giving are delinked from that incentive. We're just looking for providers to put forward an effort to follow through with the commitment you're making to start submitting monthly data as quickly as you can and work with us on the recommendations. So we could talk more about that in the questions. A question that has been consistently asked is startup funding. As I said, and we'll clarify this further in the FAQs, we are going to do a full year increase of these amounts in January. So if you get funds on the state aid letter, we're going to pass that down to the county and that'll be built into your contract. instantly to help cover any startup costs, any staff you have to do to set up the processes to get the reporting and cares in an accurate manner. And then we will include the recurring increases going forward. So again, if it's on the state aid letter, we'll be notifying the counties of your participation and the increased amount you're entitled to. If it's on a direct contract, we'll be advancing contract amendments to provide these increases to you for 2023. Everyone has asked from the beginning of this, will provider increases be dependent on the number of billable services reported? And the answer to that is no. We're just, the state is taking, revenues. We already fund these services. We want to increase the contracts and fund these services in a stronger way. We're taking the federal revenue that we're going to be able to get and putting this back into the programs. But you're not the entity that's billing. We're keeping the contract increases very mechanical and clear so that you understand what you're getting an increase for. And based on the feedback of Shinny and ACL, we don't want to change the nature of these services, right? So we're not trying to change any of the incentives in the system. We don't want, if you have beds that are filled by non-Medicaid people because they're the highest need people that meet the criteria through the SPOA process, that's fine. We are doing the increase on all beds for your program. We have been asked a lot of questions about this. Does it include only beds that are filled? And the answer to that is no, but it includes beds that are contracted. So let's say you have 100 beds on your contract, and maybe at any given point in time, you're at a fill level of 95 beds. We will be doing the increase on the 100 beds. Let's say you have an agreement with a county and you're able to do 105 beds, even though the state is only giving you funding for 100 beds. And you do that because you're a mission-driven organization and that's your agreement with the county. The increases will be on the 100 beds. So we're not applying it to float beds. We're not applying it to only filled beds. It's on your mechanical beds on contract. We're going to be increasing the stipend amount that's available for those beds. And again, there's no incentive for you to change service delivery or to change the number of non-Medicaid residents. We're going to apply that same increase no matter what. We're just looking for regular data so that we can submit claims and to start billing for services that we're providing, that the state's funding that are eligible for Medicaid. So we are not mandating it. So this is a key principle in the implementation of this, that the program is completely voluntary, that the provider can evaluate the additional workload associated with this program and can consider the opportunity relative to the enhanced contract resources. That decision is completely in your control. What we're asking at this point is for you to notify us by November 30th with the attestation to tell us whether or not you're interested in participating, so that we can start preparing the contract amendments and the increases. And we're looking for you to start working on preparing to report service data and cares. The data would be reported at the end of the month within 15 days. And like I said, we're looking for providers to start moving forward in 2023 in good faith. If you choose to wait and evaluate, that's perfectly fine. We will let you come in and pursue these contract increases at a later date. Our challenge is in 2023, we need to work on implementing those who choose to go forward. So we may make you wait until another window opens to allow you to participate, because we'll be focused on implementing the initial providers that choose to step forward. But it's completely your choice. What I would encourage you is to strongly consider participating. Many people have asked the question, can I drop out if the program's too cumbersome, if I can't fulfill my obligation? And the answer to that is you could drop out. You can give up the increased rates and go back to not reporting on a monthly basis. The reaction from many providers we've heard is that, oh, you're just trying to get data on what we're currently doing. This doesn't appear too cumbersome. I can more than cover any additional staff time required to enter in this data. And it's something that we want to pursue. So I think that's what the questions will help answer. We're going to do some training in December on CARES reporting, beyond what Julie shares today. And that'll give you more insight. So if you're even considering participating in this program, we would recommend that you reply that you would like to participate in the program. You could also tell us what beds you wanted to apply to that you're going to report on. And you could lay out any last minute questions you have or attend the training in December. And if for some reason you learn something new about this that makes you concerned that you can't fulfill your obligation to report, you can notify us that you're dropping out before we even launch this thing. So we would encourage you to strongly consider participating. Can you participate with just a portion of your housing units? And the answer to that is yes. If you want to just pursue increases on a certain program or a certain contract, you could tell us which contracts will be participating. And then we will expect reporting on that in 2023. And we will do the contract increases for just those participating units. So you have the choice on that as well. Can you withdraw from the program? Their answer is yes. So if you go forward, you start submitting monthly data. For some reason, it's incredibly cumbersome for your agency and it's not worth the contract increases that you've received. We can discontinue the contract increases and you can drop out of the program. So you're not bound going forward. We've had a lot of questions asked about what units are included. So we've issued in this guidance here that all supportive housing programs, including SROs, are included, whether they're by contract with OMH or LGUs. And the one area that we've identified as not eligible is ESHI. At this time, that's something that we're working on for future phases. We'll be working with our other sister agencies on, to help them pursue this down the road. So if you have contracts with multiple different state agencies, we're starting with OMH because OMH is the largest agency in terms of housing. We've been leaders in this area, so we have a lot of good data and infrastructure to implement this. But I know many of the questions many of you have asked, well, what about my contracts in this agency or that agency? We'll be working on that in future cycles as well as an opportunity. Again, the principle for us has been voluntary on the OMH side. So we will be considering in the future ESHI. We will also, we are making clear that CR SROs are eligible. They're under the supportive housing framework and data on that would be eligible. So we've updated supportive housing guidelines. They're posted to the website. They were released on the 30th when we came out with this information on this opportunity. As I said, the program requirements in our guidance, we said there's 4 main areas, but as I'm updating you, some of them are not very cumbersome and some of them are even on hold. So initially we thought that providers had to enroll in the Medicaid program. That is a simple process. You could actually look at the enrollment form through this link. At this point, that is on hold. The answer we're getting from DOH is subcontractors don't need to be enrolled in the Medicaid program because the state is the one billing for these services. That the good news is if this does have to be completed at some point, it is not too difficult. OMH will provide technical assistance, and 80% of the overall housing community actually provides another Medicaid service and they're already enrolled. I think we looked at the data for the Shinny community, which tends to operate more unlicensed housing. So I think the percentage for the Shinny community is a little bit lower. If I recall correctly, it's about 2/3 or 50 to 60%. So don't worry if you're not currently enrolled in the Medicaid program, nothing's going to change here at this point. To participate in this program, start sending us monthly data. You don't have to enroll. And if we do have to enroll down the road, if DOH clarifies that and OMH explains that, we'll do technical assistance. And it's really a process that should only take a few hours. At best, you're just submitting technical information. It's an exercise like the vault that you have to do for state business. You have to get on record with some basic information about your organization. The other 2 areas that I keep talking about, and it's the monthly CARES reporting, which is the big obligation of providers for participating. But the other areas you have to work with us on a recommendation. So at least every 3 years, a licensed practitioner of the healing art has to review the client participating in the program to determine eligibility for services. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Julie and Lynn are going to talk about that. the process for that. If you have a licensed practitioner of the healing art, you can do that recommendation yourself, in your organization, and the state will be reimbursing by voucher $90 a recommendation and assessment. We'll be paying that through state aid. And if you don't have an LPHA recommendation, you could either contract with an LPHA and invoice the state the $90 and pay the LPHA for their services, or you can work through the BHCC, which Lynn's going to explain. So we're setting up infrastructure to make that process work and to help support you if you don't have a licensed practitioner. That's completely fine. So that's your choice. The other requirements that we talk about is, and all of these are really consistent with the current guidelines. For the current guidelines and your contract requirements, you're supposed to have support plans. You're supposed to do some service recording. You should have records. And we've been through some of this, alongside you when OSC does periodic audits on this, and they look at some of these materials. We've seen that happen in OSC audits. So these are important things. So even if you choose not to participate here because you don't want to submit monthly data, please make sure per your contract, if you don't have strong infrastructure currently, to make sure you have support plans and service recordings per the guidelines. Work on that area over the next year or so as you consider participating in the future, because that's really a current obligation, and it's important that you do that for your clients as you provide support. So, but what we're really saying here is, if you start giving us data on a monthly basis, you should have these documents that are required by the guidelines, and if we're ever audited, it's the state that's being audited, and we will have to respond to the OMIG or an OIG, and we would just need you as a partner, as a contractor, a state aid contractor, to help provide access to those records. But we are not saying in any way that you're exposed to any risk on the audit end when it comes to a Medicaid claim. So the other requirement, and these are things that you're currently required to submit CFRs on all your documents. So we have set up a process in CARES for the monthly reporting. A question that we've always been asked: some providers use different software packages for their electronic records, and they've asked, is there some ability to connect to CARES and to dump the data on a monthly basis? At this time, we don't have that capability, but that may be a possibility in the future. What you would have to do at this time is to manually enter the data in CARES, but Julie's going to do a presentation on that, and I think you'll find that it's set up in a way that is pretty user-friendly. You can quickly enter in that data. We kind of envision that, currently in CARES, you probably have a central user adding all your data, and you'll have to evaluate that process on how to get this information in on a monthly basis. But we don't envision that you're adding dozens and dozens of users or CARES and individuals are reporting their own data. We think it's an exercise of taking your records and data in-house and having someone enter it into CARES accurately. And so it's more of an exercise of getting that information into the system that already exists than having individuals enter information directly into CARES. So I'm just throwing that out there because we see some of the questions focus on that. How are we going to train staff? Well, really, the staff should currently be doing visits and have a support plan. And the exercise is more about taking that data and information in the support plan and the visits that are going on and getting that into CARES. And it may not be the people providing the actual services. It's probably an administrator and a CARES expert who oversees the reporting and the gathering of that information and the maintenance of that information. So qualifications, a lot of people have asked this question. If you read the state plan, services can be provided by licensed practitioners. So those are all the examples of licensed practitioners. But if you read our state plans, and this exists for licensed housing and now for unlicensed housing and PROS programs, we have very similar definitions in PROS programs. You could have staff that work in a program doing tenancy supports and rehab services that are unlicensed. They have to be at least 18 years old. They have to at least have a high school degree or diploma. They have to be supervised by individuals that may be licensed or individuals with master's degrees or bachelor's or other human services degrees, or individuals with a minimum of 1 year experience in the field of medical, mental health, addiction. So we have very clear definitions of who's eligible to be providing supports and rehab services, and these definitions exist in PROS and other programs. So those are the qualifications. You could be licensed, you could be unlicensed. There should be some structure of supervision so that people understand the supports that they're giving, and some experience that either you gain on the field by doing this work or you gain through some training, again, even though you may be unlicensed. So that's a quick overview of that. Going to keep it moving so that we get through all the content. You are not submitting the claims. So when it comes to Medicaid billing, and I mentioned this clearly, providers are not billing directly, the state is. You have no audit risk on the back end. If the state goes through an OIG audit, we will not pass those audit disallowances back to the provider. This is not like an OMIG audit. If you're currently a Medicaid provider and you bill for a visit that's disallowed, you do face the risk of that audit. When it comes to OIG audits and any audit of the state bears the cost of that. And that's actually the case for any federal OIG audit. So we will be giving the enhancement to the contracts that opt in, and you're just obligated to report. We won't go back and take that enhancement back retroactively. That enhancement will be treated like any other state aid. It'll be part of your contract. You'll have to program it and use it to retain it, but it'll be available every year to cover your costs to ensure there's no deficits in this program. So I think I already said that. You will not be submitting the claims. The state will be submitting the claims. We will not pursue retroactive disallowances. At any time, OMH can do an audit of your program. So that's kind of separate from this. As we implement this and start submitting claims, we're not going to audit your program, but we may do some spot checks to make sure the data is good, that we're all submitting good data, accurate claims. And there's some questions that came in along this lines of what happens if you identify that claims are inaccurate. Well, we expect you to fix that reporting data. So if you submitted this data in January that you identified in your records, oh my goodness, I reported inaccurate information, you'd have to notify us so that we can amend our claim and fix that data in our system. We want our system to be accurate. We want it to match your system. So, but otherwise, we're not doing any audits of you. You're not exposed to any audits. Nothing changes beyond what you currently do. It's state aid on your contract. You're getting an increase, and you're expected to do the same things you're expected to do in the supported housing guidelines, in your contract requirements. If this is the question I was just covering, if you discover a mistake, you're obligated to report back to the state. So you have to report that discrepancy so we can fix it, and we can make revisions to any claims. That's our obligation as a provider billing Medicaid. LPHA recommendation. It needs to be completed for all residents. For the state to be able to bill, we need to complete this recommendation. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And we need to identify it for anyone that we're billing. And the way that the recommendation is set up, it's done every 3 years. So in the future, as people get enrolled in the program, that recommendation evaluation will probably happen as the placement is made. But we need to do it on a 3-year cycle. We're going to be looking to providers to work with the state in 2023 to get these done. We know that they can't all be done instantly. Some providers are already working on it or have processes where they feel like they can get this done pretty quickly, but we're not. We know that it's going to vary among providers, and if you don't have an LPHA, that's okay. We'll work with you, and it'll take us some time in 2023 to get the systems going, of you sharing records, of an LPHA being able to examine them and make an assessment. But I think for the most part, if you're placed in supported housing, at least initially when you're placed there because of your SMI and your need for supports, that many people are going to be determined eligible. And maybe in the long run, there will be some people who are more stable, don't need as much supports, or may not be recommended, but because this is permanent housing. But by and large, we are placing individuals in these beds through state SPOA processes, and this recommendation process, we would think for many would identify, a need for supports, which you're providing per the guidelines. So who can complete the recommendation? Any licensed practitioner of the healing arts. This is a full array, including LMHCs and all the other licensed practitioners in the mental health field. And there's a standard template and the assessment process for it. So you could actually look at this form, but again, if you don't have an LPHA and you're not the entity that's going to be coordinating it, if you're not going to do this in-house as part of your organization, the state will help you through this process Lynn's going to describe to get you access to this so that you're fulfilling your obligation to partner with us to make sure these recommendations are done. But you are welcome to do this in-house, and you are welcome to contract directly with an LPHA to do this work. So this recommendation needs to be kept on record. I think the form is pretty extensive and self-explanatory, and we're reimbursing $90 to complete the process, which we think more than covers the time and cost for this. So the recommendation is it's not a assessment. It's based on a clinical discretion. They're doing a review of the documentation that demonstrates whether services can assist an individual. The documents can include, but they're not limited to psychiatric evaluations, psychosocial history, residential service plan, progress notes. You don't have to review all these documents, the LPHA, and you can conduct a face-to-face or virtual assessment with the individual, but that's not necessary, to be eligible for these services based on the review of the record. So there's a form on that. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And in terms of resources, there is a process that we're setting up where if you don't have an LPHA, you're going to be able to share records and get a recommendation through the BHCCs, and there'll be more information available on that. Lynn's going to go through it now. But we're paying $90 for the completion of each LPHA recommendation. You could complete those on, every 3 years, or the state will be helping you to get access completion of those. And that should cover the costs, and they'll be reimbursed via voucher. So you'll be invoicing OMH, and we'll be paying you for that. If you choose to utilize the BHCCs, those dollars get passed along to the BHCCs. If you choose to contract with an LPHA yourself, you're billing for the $90 and contracting with the LPHA. So Lynn will talk more about that, and you're obligated to keep records, as I said. And the key thing is that you're submitting the information in CARES on a monthly basis within 30 days at the end of the month. And record keeping, there are no minimum frequency service durations for the so everyone's asked, is there a required amount of time required for delivering the services? So that's not defined in the SPA. We're not defining a minimum frequency of service duration for your visits. We're just asking you that report every time you provide a support service in a given month. We're asking you that you report the date and the type of services provided, and that that's in your service plan, and you report it in CARES. And I've already mentioned this question. Will the CARES be able to accept data from any existing EHRs? And the answer to that is no at this time, but we're going to explore that in the future. More work will continue. Can you report, will we require providers to report service level of detail for all residents or just those that are Medicaid eligible? The answer to that is all residents. We're giving a contract increase on your entire contract based on beds. We're trying to ensure that there's no framework or incentive to increase services or change service delivery or serve Medicaid versus non-Medicaid clients. We are asking you to submit monthly service data of all the supports that you're providing each month, and including those who are Medicaid eligible, Medicaid ineligible, and that's the requirement for getting the contract increase. And the state is doing the work of submitting the claim. We will verify whether an individual is enrolled in Medicaid. We will verify what's eligible, what's not, and submit a bundle claim. And people ask, on the current guidelines, we require at least one face-to-face per month. Will you need to increase the number of visits? And the answer to that is no. This is a monthly rate that we're billing. We're billing for any eligible visits in a given month. We are asking you to send us data on all visits that you do in a month. So if you do more than one to a client, we ask that you report on the dates of those visits and the support that you provided. We will be collecting all that in our data set, but we'll be billing for at least a minimum of one contact a month for any eligible individuals. That's the way the state plan is set up. The visits can be on-site in the home, or it can also be provided via telehealth. And again, this is all in the updated supportive housing guidelines that you can read, but it can be virtually or face-to-face. Many people have asked the question, is this duplicative of any other services out there? Is this duplicative of ACT? Is this duplicative of Health Home or HCBS Core? And the answer to that is no. There is no duplication of services here. These are tenancy supports to help people maintain independent living in housing. So this is actually what we contract with you for, to help administer the rent, help keep people stable in housing, and to provide tenancy support. So the services that these other state plan services cover, like ACT or Health Homes or HCBS Core, they're providing other assistance, beyond tenancy supports or in different settings. And those are all eligible services that are not duplicative. So they're all covered. Who makes the determination? OMH makes the determination. If you're supporting the data accurately pursuant to the guidelines and submitting the information in CARES, so your staff have to understand all that. They have to take the data from your support plans and from your regular contacts and get that into CARES. The state will be using that data to verify whether the recipient's enrolled and prepare the claim. So you don't have to worry about that. If you provide more than one service in a month, will you be reporting on both services? Yes, we want you reporting on all services, regardless of Medicaid eligibility and in a given month. Should you report to individuals that are dual eligible? Yes. And I think we already answered the question, should you report for individuals that are not Medicaid eligible? So I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Lynn to cover the remaining content on the CARES reporting, which is the key deliverable that you're obligated to submit, and the LPHA recommendation option that we have laid out if you don't want to do that work yourself. And then we'll have the last hour for questions for everyone.
Thanks, Emma. I'm just going to cut in for a second.
No problem.
So there's a couple folks, a number of folks have put questions in the Q&A. And so just to encourage folks to continue to do that, as Emil said, we'll have plenty of time for questions. But Emil, if you want to take a look at the Q&A and answer to some of them, feel free to do that. Okay, sorry.
That's great. No, that's awesome. So we'll have Julie and Lynn go through their material, and we will have a full hour, and we will stay till every question's answered. But
Perfect,
I'll start looking at those questions so that we're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you. Emil, can you just advance it to the next slide? Okay, so I'll go through these, like Emil said, really quick. There are two main categories, if you will, of services. Essentially, the first one, community integration skill building service, is speaking to individuals who need support to newly transition into the housing and establish their community integration and housing stability. The second category, stabilization services, is for those individuals who are already enrolled in your program and need support to assist them in maintaining that stability that they've already established. Next slide. Then within those two categories, there are these list of services, and again, it encompasses a lot of the stuff that you're doing already. Community integration needs assessment, that's just the assessment that you would do when somebody is newly admitted to your program to identify you know, what their needs are, what their strengths are, what the challenges they have to maintaining or establishing that housing stability. So that's that initial assessment that you might do. You might be identifying what linkages they need, that kind of stuff, just the preliminary assessment. And then the next one, treatment planning. I know we don't do treatment planning in housing, but that's what it's called in the SPA. So we mirrored the language there. But this is really just the initial support plan that you would do with an individual when they are newly enrolled in your housing program. And then tenancy support planning is the review of that support plan that you do quarterly. So anytime that you're meeting with an individual to review their support plan, modify it based on their needs, that would be a billable service under tenancy support planning. And then that gets us into really the kind of the meat of the services here. So rehabilitative independent living skills training, that's really all of the skill building that you're doing with an individual to, again, help them establish or maintain that housing stability. So, you know, helping them understand their rights and responsibilities as a tenant, helping them understand how to maintain good landlord-tenant relationships, helping them with budgeting skills, any sort of skill-based service that you're doing would fall under this category. And then community resource coordination, that's anything you're doing to help the individual establish the linkages they need to become integrated in their community and be successful. So, you know, linking with services, service providers or other community resources, you know, helping them learn their community, anything, again, anything that involves that linkage and advocacy that you do in the programs would fall under this a kind of broad category. And then next, I think we have crisis planning. Emil, can you just advance the slide? Again, that's anything that you do with an individual around planning to prevent or for what to do when they're experiencing a crisis. So, you know, any safety planning that you might do, any connection to supports that somebody would utilize in a crisis, all of that work that you do in advance of a potential crisis to, again, to help either stave off or mitigate the effects of a potential crisis in the future. And then the next service would be crisis support. So again, that's anything that you're doing with the individual in the midst of a crisis. So again, any linking with services, you know, maybe they need to go to a crisis, you know, a crisis stabilization center, a crisis residence, or they need, you know, an emergency appointment with their service providers, anything that you might do when there is a crisis to help assist the individual to get through the crisis to, again, maintain their housing stability. Next slide. Actually, I think you can go 2 slides, Emil. So, again, services are individualized. You know, Emil mentioned this, but I you know, just want to reiterate, we continue to expect, just like as it is right now, that the services that you're providing to the folks are based on their individual needs. We're not asking you to do anything differently than what you are already doing. So we shouldn't change the services based on this initiative here. The services that you're providing should continue to be driven by the individual's needs and desires. Telehealth can be utilized for this where appropriate. You're still required as part of the supportive housing program to do one face-to-face, so one in-person service a month. We think that's an important and valuable component of supportive housing. So you still have to do that one in-person visit per month with an individual. But if you're providing additional services, those can be provided via telehealth. And we would ask you to document those in CARES. And again, there's no requirement that all of your residents in your program are receiving rehabilitative and tenancy support services. You may have some folks that don't need support. You may have folks that aren't on Medicaid. You may have folks that, their needs don't fall under these category of services that are billable, and that is fine. Next slide. As Emil already mentioned, there's no service duplication between these services and other billable services. Since we already touched on it, I'll just keep moving to the next slide. The LPHA authorization, again, it's based on a clinical determination that an individual could benefit from these services to help establish or maintain their housing stability. If you're choosing to participate, we would ask that you get recommendations for everybody that is currently enrolled in your program who is receiving Medicaid or applying for Medicaid. And then going forward, as somebody is newly admitted to your program, you would get a recommendation, and then it needs to be renewed once every 3 years. And we would look for you to work on obtaining that authorization about a month prior to the expiration, so that there's no gap in the recommendation. And we'll show you the there is a form that you'll utilize for the LPHA recommendation, and there will be some fields in CARES that you'll have to complete just that, once every 3 years, to document that there is a recommendation on file, so we know, so OMH knows that we can bill for the services for that individual. So the CARES reporting for the programs that opt in. So if you have a program that you choose to participate, all of the services that you provide should be documented in CARES. We'll show you the screens in a little bit, but there's a drop down that lists out both billable and non-billable services. So we would expect you to document all of the services, again, whether you think it's Medicaid billable or not, or if you're providing multiple services in a month, that we would document all of those services. You can enter those services in once a month. We ask that any documentation is completed within 15 days of the end of a month. So if you're documenting for January, that by February 15th, you complete the documentation for January, so we can then go in and pull out the data and complete the billing. Okay, so these are the CARES screens. So for the staff that work in CARES, these screens are going to look very familiar to them. This is the screen that comes up when you first log into CARES. And you'll see there are tabs across the top of the screen. If you select the data entry tab, there is now an option for tenancy services, and you would just click on tenancy services. And then next slide. So that'll bring up a screen that shows it will show all of your SPSROs, scattered site supportive housing, and CRSROs. We're making the update to put CRSROs in. Again, this is a screen that looks familiar to your staff that are already working in CARES. When they are doing data entry for new admissions or discharges, this is a screen that comes up, and they're already used to looking at the screen and selecting the program. So what they do is they select whichever program they want to work with, and then click proceed. And then next screen. So this is going to bring you to the screen where you can do the data entry. So if this were a live program, what you would see on the bottom of this screen under the line where it says recipient name, recipient CIN, admission date, you would have a list of all of the residents that are currently enrolled in that program. You can also, I'll just point out, there's a screen that says roster date as of. You can change the roster date. So if you're going back to do data entry for somebody that was discharged on the date that you're going in to do the data entry, you can change that date so you can go back and then the person will be listed here. So anyway, so it'll bring up a list of all of the people that are enrolled. You would just click on one of the names, and when you click on the name, that'll auto populate in the middle of the screen there where it says first name, last name. And then Emil, can you go to the next screen? So there's a drop down list of all of the services. So we've identified all of the billable services, any non-billable services, and there's also just an other non-billable service category if you think you know, that the service you provided doesn't fall into any of the pre-populated categories here. You would just pick a service and then enter in the tenancy service date, and then you can save it. And so you could enter multiple services for one person right from this screen. You can go through the list of recipients enrolled in the program and enter in all of the services that you've provided in a month to everybody in this program right from this screen. You can also from this screen, I apologize, I don't have a screenshot of it, but if you were to click the client service tab, which is grayed out here, but it wouldn't be if you actually had a client selected. If you click that client service tab, that takes you into the client record essentially, where you could also document a bunch of services for the client, but that's also where you will document the LPHA recommendation, the date that it was completed. And I think there are a couple of other screens that need to be filled out. So all of it can be done right from this screen. Again, we've built it as user-friendly as I think we possibly can. So you know, I think as you know, your agencies will need to do a little work on the front end to come up with systems so you can kind of compile the data of the services that you're providing to do the data entry. But once you have that system, I think that you'll find that it's fairly simple and quick to enter the data on the services from this screen. Next question or next slide. Okay, do we have Lynn?
You do have a Lynn.
Oh, great.
Hi. All right. Thank you, Emil. So we've already talked about this a little bit. This is a convenience for providers who want to use it. You're not required to use it. If you don't have a LPHA in your organization or that you have a relationship with, or if you just don't want your LPHAs to be doing this process because, you know, workload issues or any other reason, the state has put together a resource for you that you can use using a secure portal called REDCap. And we have a few screenshots for you later on that. And you would just go into the REDCap and choose a BH-IPA. There's going to be, you know, the names of the IPAs and the regions they're in. We're encouraging you to work with the IPAs that are in your region, but you don't have to. Again, you know, it's completely open for you. And you choose that IPA, a list drops down, you send them a referral, an email, essentially. They receive it, they can either accept it, or if they don't have the bandwidth at that time because they've been inundated by these, they can reject it or deny it, and then you can go back and choose another one. It's also possible that some of the IPAs will actually have then a secondary drop-down list that has the actual provider with their email, and you can be directly in contact with them. All of the documents will go through the secure portal. There's a place, and we'll show you, where you can just upload whatever it is that you decide is needed for this LPHA practitioner to do a desk review, to provide the recommendation. They will send it back to you through the portal. You will, you know, record in CARES the date that the LPHA recommendation was done, and then it'll be between the supportive housing provider and the BHIPA or the LPHA provider to work out the billing. My assumption is that the IPA or the provider will just invoice you, and you will then forward them the $90 that the state is going to send you for these recommendations being done. So can we go to the next slide, please? I think I've actually already talked about all of these things, and we can go into the slide, into these screenshots. This is just a map of where the different IPAs are. You can't see it on a slide deck, but when you have this in front of you, you'll be able to see who's in your region. Next slide, please. So this is the REDCap portal. It's very simple. You put in your email address. Here's the drop down for choosing a BHIPA. You'll pull that down. It'll tell you which IPAs are available and what region they're in. Next slide, please. And then you just give them very simple demographic information about the person that you're sending, over for a recommendation. You upload the documents. Next slide, please. And you close a survey, which basically just means you close the portal, and an email is then generated that goes to that IPA with the referral. And you will receive, notification when that IPA has either accepted or declined that referral. And then you'll work together to, if they need any other information that you haven't uploaded, they can email you, and you work together to figure out billing at the front end. That is pretty much it. I'm going to stay on board, for questions. And again, I just want to really emphasize that this is totally voluntary. You do not have to use IPAs. You can contract with other LPHAs. You can use your own LPHAs. It's entirely up to you. This is just a convenience the state has put together in case you'd like to use it, or if it's an easier way for you to do this.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks to those who've been populating the Q&A with some questions. Maybe I'm happy just to field them now. We could go through them. I'll just note there were at least one that was answered. Folks are asking, can you confirm the process of how to notify the state that you would like to participate? And I shared the attestation PDF form, the link, which is due by November 30th. Let me know if there's anything else folks want to add to that. I'll pause.
That's great.
Okay.
No, thank you very much. We have the Q&A box open. We can start
Okay.
going through those. And then we also have the questions shared ahead of time by providers that I could read and the OMH team can answer.
Okay, great. Do you want to start there with the ones that were sent in advance?
That sounds great. Okay,
Okay.
so I'll start reading those and then we'll make sure we get through all the ones in the Q&A when we finish with that. So do you have a sense at what point providers can drop out of the program if they find it too onerous? So that's a question people keep asking. Again, we would encourage you to participate, to start to send monthly data, and we haven't defined, dropping out, but if, it is clear that you can withdraw from the program. If you can't fulfill your obligation, that's fine. Again, we're going to be working in 2023 to get regular reporting before the end of the year on all these units submitted into CARES. So what we're just looking for providers who are going to work with us on that and in good faith try to submit this data. We're not defining what good faith is. We assume that if you say you're going to participate in the program, you're going to try your best. And if you're not able to do it or it's burdensome at some point and you're explaining that to us and why, yeah, no problem dropping out. So we're not, this is voluntary and we stand behind that. So can OMH create and distribute a standardized training on how to document services correctly in CARES? So we will be setting up additional training on CARES and the screens and all of these details for providers that are choosing to participate in December. So we'll have some dates announced for that, and we'll go into the details we shared, and we'll go further. We'll answer questions solely focused on CARES reporting and the services, and that'll be set up for December. How can providers sign up by November 30th? Will there be some sort of contract? If so, will the contract include the promise that the program will remain voluntary and that providers are free to disenroll and will not be penalized monetarily? So yes, thank you, Pascal, for sharing the link to the December 30th sheet. We're asking providers to tell us if they're going to participate or not. And what'll happen is that there'll be no contract on the front end. We have the rules out there. We will be using those rules and your interest to participate to do a contract amendment. So we will either be increasing the state aid for the county that holds your contract or amending our direct contract with you. And that's the only contract that exists. We view that if you're getting this enhanced amount, we have guidelines out there on what it means and what it's related to and what the standards are. and we will not be adding additional language into the contract. We also view that this announcement and this information that is out there as you make this choice is the information on record. So we are saying very clearly that this is voluntarily and you can choose to participate or not, and you could drop out. In fact, when you look at our FAQs, there are probably 10 to 20 questions on that. So we stand behind that information, and technically there are no penalties if you choose not to participate, and there are no penalties if you choose to drop out. The thing that does happen though is if you join, we're getting you the contract increases. If you drop out, those additional enhancements will come off the contract. So that's, we don't view that as a penalty. We view it as a clear rule that you're going to get this additional enhancement if you're getting us the data on a monthly basis. And if you choose not to participate, or you choose to discontinue sending us the data and withdraw, the enhancement would be removed. So
And Emil, I'm sorry, I'm just going to confirm that it's
Thank you.
November 30th.
yeah, November 30th.
Okay, you
to
said
let us
December,
know.
so just making sure. Okay.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you so much. Yeah, it's November 30th. You're letting us know of your interest. That what's going to happen at that point is OMH is scheduling all this additional training and follow-up so that you understand the CARES reporting and everything we're sharing here in more detail. And OMH will be working on the contract amendments. That's what we're starting. When you tell us you're participating, we are working on the contract amendments, which we're very excited to do. Will OMH create a feedback loop and monthly meetings where providers can discuss emerging issues? That is a great comment and question, and I think the answer to that is yes. So our goal is to launch this. We're going to do some training on these two areas that Julie and Lynn shared in some more depth, and then we will have a regular forum for providers that are participating. And we talked about, many people asked, you know, can the field get access to the overall data? How does it look in terms of the services that are being provided, the claims that are being submitted? You have OMH's commitment for transparency and sharing that information. And I think the concept of a regular feedback loop where we're getting together, we're helping to support, provide any technical assistance needed to ensure you fulfill your reporting requirements, and that you're also sharing feedback on your end, what's working well, what's not. We would welcome that, and we will commit to doing that in 2023, setting up some regular forum on implementation for those choosing to participate. And, you know, same thing, if you choose not to participate, you know, we will, you know, as we work on this and we get more experience, we will share that information so that you could choose to participate at a later date if you want to. But, you know, our challenges in 2023, we got to focus on getting this done. So we're only going to be able to work with all the ones that raise their hand and choose to move forward. And future windows of joining participation will open at later points. Julie, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add, we have a supportive housing mailbox set up. It's where you send the attestation to. You can also send any questions that you have there. And we have Liz Kofi, who works in the Housing Bureau. She's our data person, and she does technical assistance for CARE. So you know, we can dispatch her to help with any challenges people are facing with their data entry and CARES.
And that's actually the next question. So I view that response answers it exactly. Will OMH create a help desk for staff confused about how to input into CARE? So we do have technical experts like Liz that help providers with CARES. She will be available as you know, as we go live and start getting reporting. Okay, still going through the questions submitted beforehand to make sure we answered them all. Eligibility. Are supported housing programs funded by OMH, New York City, eligible? If so, what is the timetable? So any funds that OMH funds on the state aid letter that DOH may hold, if it's something that's related to OMH funding and it's an eligible unit, we will provide the enhancement for it. So if you, when you respond and say you're interested in participating, if you want to lay out your array of supported housing programs that are connected to OMH funding, regardless of whether or not the city holds the contract or the state holds the contract, we will let you know what we have on record and what we're able to do the increases for, so that you have that information, you know, as you prepare to start reporting. So, but yes, if the city holds that contract, OMH, on behalf of OMH and we have some funding and skin in the game, we can include it. We've been asked the question, will participation have any impact on HUD funded programs? And I think we're gonna issue some more guidance in our FAQs on that. But the one thing we're very careful here is if there's other federal grants or money that is supporting services, we can't duplicate. And if those services are already funded by another source, we're not billing Medicaid for those. So we'll have to look at, you should identify any programs that you have HUD funded blended in, and we will study the nature of those programs to see whether or not they're able to participate in this. But we will work with you as we look at your portfolio. If you raise your hand and say you want to participate, we will work with you to make sure that you know which units were able to participate and give you the enhancement for it. Okay, billable services. What happens if someone falls off the Medicaid rolls during the year? What is the process? The good news is it's completely irrelevant for all of the work on your end. We just want monthly service data for people in your housing units that we're contracting with you for, and OMH will determine if someone's on Medicaid, off Medicaid. OMH will prepare the claim. That's nothing that you have to worry about. We would like to get a better understanding of the billing process, the denial process. Since we are uploading all the notes and cares and OMH is making the determination, we would like to know what criteria will be used to qualify a claim as a bill. So again, we're committed to sharing any data that we collect on an overall scale, de-identified, with the field. And you are correct that you are reporting to us actual units of service provided, but you are not uploading notes to us. We're saying that you have to keep your service plans consistent with the supported housing guidelines, and that OMH is taking the service data, preparing the claim. We will share information on the claim, but we are submitting a claim for any eligible service that is provided. So I think a lot of folks do have questions about the CARES data and making sure that they're hitting the standard, which we applaud. We want to make sure that you understand this fully as you start submitting us data. So I think that's what the December sessions will dedicate more time to. But you're really just telling us in CARES the different supports you may have provided in the given month, and OMH is taking that data and preparing a claim. You do not have to worry about billing or denial. You have no risk as a provider of any changes to that claim impacting your revenue or your flow. The field has asked OMH, as we start billing, will you share updates on how much revenue is billed? And we said, yes, we will. And we're working to try to get this money back into the program. So you have our commitment for transparency there. We will show you what we've accomplished together and what we're able to bill for, so that you'll have that insight and assurance that we're investing these dollars. So can you provide standards for content of notes to support services selected in the awards? So I'm reading that question as, what are the standards for notes in your support plans? So clearly in CARES, you're going to be telling us whether or not a service was provided. So we kind of showed you the array of services. You'll be telling us on this date, Monday, X date of November, I provided this type of tenancy support. And we're using that data in CARES to bill the federal government. And you're in this question, I read that you're asking, well, what is your standard for actual notes in your support plan? So the standard is the current standards in the supported housing guidelines. So we require that you have a support plan and that you have some information on the contacts and support services you're providing. So Julie could talk a little bit more about that. And I'm sure that's going to be a question that will be asked in the December training sessions. So we really appreciate your diligence and focus on it.
Yeah, and we added just a little bit of beefed up language in the supportive housing guidelines to indicate some things that your progress notes should include, like obviously the date of the service, the individual, staff person providing the service. But in general, it's the same level of documentation that we always expected, just a progress note indicating what service was given and the details of the interaction.
Yeah, we're really not trying to change your current service delivery. This is a great conversation regardless. I mean, you really want to understand, what we do require in a service plan and how you're documenting it. So, but we're not trying to change your current practice of service delivery.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, can we just spend just a second on that? Because I think that's like the number one question we've been getting. And I just want to confirm, and I think you've said it, but just if you could just underscore, underline, exclamation point, the fact that providers do not need to pay attention to what services are deemed Medicaid billable, right?
Absolutely,
Correct.
you have it
Thank
spot
you.
on. You're just reporting to us the services that you're providing. CARES will be organized, collecting data on the Medicaid services as well as non-Medicaid services. We have other common supports that you provide pursuant to the supported housing guidelines. And yeah, you don't have to worry about what's Medicaid, not Medicaid. You don't have to worry about whether or not an individual is Medicaid or not. We're just saying if you participate, we want the data on all of your supported housing beds that are participating. And the state will be doing that work and taking that risk and submitting claims and billing. You will be getting guaranteed contract increases for all of the capacity that's participating in the reporting.
Yeah, I think the one kind of piece of work that the providers will have to do is, you know, whatever language you're using currently around your services, you'll have to be able to identify, you'll have to map it to the list of services provided in CARES. You know, but I think that's just, it's a little bit of work on the front end. And once you have that, then you'll be good to go. It won't be ongoing work, but you just need to make sure that you have a mechanism for matching up whatever language you're using now with the language that's in the SPA.
So, okay, so can we sign up a selected group of residents and not an entire program? For example, 25 of 100. I think what we're looking for is capacity on contracts. So we want to keep this as operationally workable as possible. So what we're looking, if you want to participate, and we've already laid out the option clearly that you can participate on part of your capacity. Tell us when you tell us you want to participate by November 30th. Tell us what you're proposing in terms of submittal. You know, our thought was, you know, we obviously want to keep this clean on contracts, so we know what we're getting, and we can ensure we're ultimately getting monthly reporting on it. So I think the simpler we keep it, you know, the quicker we can get your contract increases through, and that you guys can work on reporting for us. If a service other than crisis is provided that is not on the supported housing plan, should it be selected in CARES? That's a great question, Julie.
Yeah, so the two kind of main categories, the skill building service and the community integration. I'm still learning language myself, but those two general categories, they need to be tied back to the support plan. You're right, crisis services might not be reflected in the support plan, and that's fine. The support plan development and support plan review obviously aren't going to be, you're not going to document in the support plan that you're going to do a support plan. So, you know, those ones don't make sense, but yes, those two kind of main buckets where I expect the majority of your billable services will lie, and the skill building service and the community integration, those should tie back to the support plan.
Great. Another question, Julie, for you. We are also concerned about entering in CARES document, such as we're concerned about entering in CARES documenting when tenants are no-shows. Is there a way for us to only enter successful contacts in CARES?
Yeah, so that, I mean, that is all, you're only going to be documenting the actual services that you deliver. So you wouldn't need to document an attempt or a no-show or anything like that. And if the concern is about not documenting a service, you know, I think we have an awareness that there are times where, you know, somebody may not need a service, somebody, you know, may not be available for a service. I don't think you need to worry about any, you know, oversight, because there are occasional instances where you're not providing the service. I think, you know, if, you know, we go in and look at the data and there's no documentation across the board or consistently for lots of people, you're not providing services, then that would warrant a conversation. But I don't think you need to worry about those instances where there are no shows. In general, if it's clear to us that you're doing the documenting and cares, there won't be an issue.
Yeah, so if you agree to participate for 100 beds on contract, and we're seeing data come in on a regular basis on 90 of them, we get that there may be months where you don't have a service for an individual, or there's a no-show, and that's yeah, that's a great explanation. Thank you, Julie. Okay, downstate specific for contract amounts. So on the downstate basis, when we provide these increases in January for startup, because they only have a 50% year remaining, will the state allow some sort of carryover of unspent funds? So we will look at that and figure out whatever flexibility we can give to fully utilize those funds, because we know that you have a shorter period. So, but going forward, once we get through the initial infusion and the recurring increases, it'll be part of your contract. It'll be normal closeout rules, but we are hearing a lot of questions like that, and we want to give the flexibility for you guys to actually use these resources. We don't just want to recoup it in a closeout process. So we will work with you on the one-time resources to ensure that they're reported in a way that they're not reconciling closed out in that normal process, so you have time to spend it. We have a question on the licensed practitioner of the healing arts, attesting to determination of medical necessity use. Can they use the agency's MPI number as we do for core, or must the individual obtain one for themselves?
I believe, and I'll ask you both to keep me honest on this, that you have to get your own MPI. It's a very easy process. It's like 5 to 10 minutes online. It shouldn't be a barrier.
Yep, that was the answer from counsel's office.
Yep, great. Okay, so I'm going to go to the Q&A in the chat boxes, and we'll go through each one. So a question from Noel: are DMH contracts within supportive housing included in this initiative? So we answered that question that yes, New York City DOH-MH contracts, if they're state funded and related to OMH, are eligible for this. You should identify that in your submission when you say you want to participate. From Gary, is this funding mechanism available for providers of scattered site housing, or is it only for providers of congregate housing? This is available for scattered site or congregate if it's a supportive housing program and you're providing tenancy supports to help them maintain their housing and independence in the community. So it is available for all of the programs that we detailed in the FAQ, including scattered sites, supportive housing, rental units, as well as CR, SRO, I think we said SBSRO as well. Okay, will there be any restrictions on eligible uses for contract enhancement funding? Can providers use the money to increase base pay and or provide bonuses? And the answer to that is no, there won't be any restrictions. And yes, you can use the money to increase pay and provide bonuses. The nice part about doing a uniform contract increase, if you participate, is you have stability in those additional revenues to program it for increases in base pay and or doing bonuses. So and you're perfectly willing, or you're perfectly able to do that. It'll be included on your normal contract as a separate increase, and you have the flexibility to use it for that. From Tanisha, when will we be notified if we have to enroll in Medicaid? Do you have any sense of timing of this? So right now at this point, we will be doing the contract increases in January without having that information. If we do get a final answer from DOH that a provider has to enroll in Medicaid, you have OMH's commitment that we will do trainings, webinars, provide any assistance necessary to complete this process to enroll in Medicaid. It is not very cumbersome, and we will provide technical assistance to help. So don't don't let that be a major factor in deciding whether or not to participate. The good news is the entire design of this is you're not submitting a claim, you're not dealing with eMedNy, you're not dealing with contracts with related to managed care. It is still very simple state aid. We're only saying you have to submit to us your monthly data and cares. And so don't let that be a main factor, because even if DOH said tomorrow, yes, subcontractors have to enroll in Medicaid, it's a very simple process that just of you getting on record your organization, you know, some of your technical information, and the state will help you with that. Michelle, when will this data be due each month? So I think in our guidance, we said that we're requiring providers to submit 15 days after the end of the month. So that's our goal. We want to get into a regular habit of submitting a claim. And that's the standard that we're defining in participation. We know coming out of the gate, you're not going to perfectly hit that standard. You're going to be working to ensure you put in place a process to get in regular reporting. So we're looking at good faith effort on the part of providers to start to get us monthly reporting so that by the end of 2023, we have all the recommendations done and we're starting to do regular reporting on the full scope. So okay, so that was Michelle from Gary. Where do we go to submit our attestation by 11:30? Thank you very much. There's a mailbox that is referenced in our guidance and the form, so you could check the box, sign on behalf of your agency. We are going to be asking agencies to tell us yes or no to participation. If you don't want to participate, we just ask that you tell us, and it's fine. It just means that we know that we didn't miss anyone. And we will work with you in the future to invite you again. But you know, if you could tell us either way, but there's a mailbox set up and you send in that form. Okay, from Deepak, does the LPHA need their individual MPI to attest to services, or can they use the agency's MPI? I think we had that question already and Lynn answered it, that getting an MPI is very simple. And I think we're asking that the individual's MPI be put on the form.
Yeah, I just want to mention real quick, going back to the last question, Pascal did put the mailbox in the chat too for where to send the attestation.
Thank you so much. Okay, it's from Ron. Did the attestation form go out to providers? And the answer to that is yes, it did. It went out to providers in the overall guidance. So you could see the link in the FAQs, or you could see it in the memo that describes this opportunity and get to the attestation form, but we did not submit individual attestation forms to each CEO, CFO. So you have to complete that attestation form from the package. You have to click on it and respond. I think we will be trying to ensure that we got answers from everyone, but it's important, especially if you want to participate, to make sure that you don't miss that out. We will send out the slides. Thanks, Ron. We'll send out the package of slides, which has a lot of these links. So we'll send that to Pascal right after this webinar ends. From Chris, I did not see a licensed OT as an LPHA. Should they, could they be? That's a great question, Julie, from our discussions with the attorneys. Can you answer Chris's question?
I am sorry, I was reading an email.
Oh,
I did. Can you repeat?
OT, occupational therapist. Can a licensed occupational therapist? Well, we didn't see it on the list of the.
They're not on the list. No, they're not. They're not a licensed practitioner of the healing art.
In the field of these rehab services.
Right.
Okay. So yep, they're not eligible per our work on this, our legal review. Thomas, will OMH require agencies to try to get clients approved for Medicaid spend down? Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer to that is that's a complexity that the state's going to have to deal with on the Medicaid billing end. So we have no insight that I'm aware of at this time. We have a separate team that's going to be working on the claims process. And we will have to navigate any clients that may be in a technical spend down mode. We'll have to evaluate that further. So in terms of a provider agency's participation, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to get us monthly data, and that's a technical step that we'll have to ensure, the processes work properly, because you understand, correct, Thomas, that if there is a client and spend down, we'll have to make sure that any technical, claiming on that end, complies with all that. Okay, so Cynthia Stewart, are socialization services included on the drop-down list? Groups, recreation? That's a great question. Relates to services that may not be Medicaid eligible, but clearly supports that the supported housing community are providing, and their critical support. So, Julie, can you answer that question?
Yep, so they are on the drop-down list and they're not a billable service.
Great.
So if that's what you're doing with folks, that's fine. You would just select that and we'll know when we pull the data not to bill for that service.
It's great. And I think we tried to capture all the types of services that go on out there and are reflected in our supported housing guidelines. And if there's any other examples like that we think we missed, that you think we missed, you can get us that feedback, and we'll explore like adding that to the regular data collection, so that we have that insight, for the system. And so that's very helpful. From Shakisha, will there be a reminder for when the authorization for LPHA will need to be renewed? Yes, we're actually gonna, you saw the screen in CARES, we're actually gonna add a field within CARES that has the date of the initial recommendation, and that will be a flag for OMH if for some reason it isn't renewed before the 3-year window, that we can't bill, and it needs to be renewed, but we will set up a process between now and for the 3-year cycle that we are flagging for providers who needs to be renewed. And we haven't designed that yet because we're trying to launch this, but it's a great question, and we will get that work underway once we start successfully billing and collecting data. From William, do you need to have a corresponding note in the client record, progress note in an EHR, that the service was provided to the tenant? That would be a backup record to mirror what has been loaded into CARES. And I'm going to give the initial answer. I'm going to let Julie add to it. The answer is yes. You should have a note in the record. You should have a record that you provided a tenancy support, a service to the client on a given date and time. And I think Julie explained a little bit already, what the current standards and expectations are, and Julie can answer that further.
Yeah, I mean, that's not any different from our expectation, whether you're participating or not. There should be a note documenting in the record that the service was delivered. And again, there is a little bit more detail in the supportive housing guidelines about the specific components that the note should include, like the date of the service, the individual who delivered the service. But yeah, there should have always been a progress note documenting that a service was delivered in the record.
Okay, so a question from Sharon. Will HRA eligibility suffice for the initial LPHA recommendation that services would benefit the individual? Great question. The answer to that is we need an LPHA recommendation on a form that complies with the standards that we've laid out. To the extent that HRA in a placement of an individual, we know that HRA does the SPOA and the placements downstate in the city. If they have a LPHA working on that function and perform that work, they can bill for the $90, and OMH would reimburse it. I think in the future, that's probably where this work will get done. But HRA eligibility itself does not suffice for the recommendation. That recommendation process has to be completed. We do agree with the question, the nature of the question, that HRA is evaluating individuals and obviously placing the people with the highest need for tenancy supports. And we would think that the vast majority of people coming through the process would qualify through the LPHA recommendation. But no, the eligibility in and of itself does not trump the need to complete the LPHA recommendation.
Yeah, I think our goal down the line is to get the recommendation form embedded in the HRA application or the SPOA applications across the state. We're just not there yet.
Thank you. Okay, Jenna asked the question, can you confirm that the first payment, $1,200, will be in our contracts for all contract beds in January? And that moving forward, you'll receive $300 quarterly increase. This is obviously for a downstate bed in April going forward for those who have completed recommendation forms and not per contract bed. So yeah, our goal is to get startup funds out there in January, the full annual amount. We're going to clarify that in our FAQs. And then going forward, we will do a permanent contract increase for all beds, all contracted capacity that are participating. That will not be linked to whoever's just completed the forms. We're expecting that the agency is starting to move forward on this, starting to complete forms with us, either through the central process we're setting up. And we expect that the agency is starting to report data and moving towards a process where all data would be submitted regularly pursuant to the standards before the end of 2023. So yeah, no, we're doing the full increase for the contracted beds for all participating units, not just who you completed the recommendation forms for. Our view is that you're going to be working with us in 2023 to get this done and get this all working for all monthly submissions on a regular basis, and all the recommendations will be done on or before the end of 2023. That's the goal. Okay, Sharon, please provide more details on what extra services look like. Provide more details about the required face-to-face telehealth counts at some point. Yeah, I think we covered that. Telehealth does count. The extra services, we laid out the full array as defined in the SPA. We're going to do more training on what these are. These really are the services that you currently provide. So they're not extra. They're really what you're currently doing. And we want to get data on them so that we can draw down a federal share to invest more in these programs. Is the $1,200 a year broken down by month or provided at the end of the year, assuming that the services qualify? The $1,200 is provided at the beginning up front in January, as Jenna understood and asked. And then it will be provided on a recurring basis, regardless of whether or not we bill or the services you're providing, are Medicaid eligible, and it will be provided on a quarterly basis. So it'll be consistent with your current contracts, whether held by the county or the state. If it's held by the county, you're subject to the county process for managing that, but the state will be increasing your stipend amount by the $1,200 or the $600 permanently going forward, as long as you keep submitting the data. If you choose to drop out of the program at some point, we'll be removing that $1,200 and $600 enhancement. So, and it does apply to SROs and supported housing. So you have that correct. When you express eligibility through the attestation, your interest in participating through the attestation, let us know what contracts you think fall under the guidelines that we're issuing here, and we will lock down with you on what we're able to participate in this program. Does OMH suggest a different staffing pattern versus keeping the same team structures and existing staff providing the extra services? No, we think it's what you're currently doing, and we're just looking for data to help use these resources to support you better, because we know the challenges that you're facing running the program, and these extra revenues for what we're currently doing would be helpful to deal with recruitment, retention, and stuff like that. Can funds be used to provide staff completing the work with increases bonuses? Absolutely. You guys have the flexibility to make that choice. Can funds be used for tenant needs? Absolutely. You guys have the flexibility to make that choice. You should know that, as we build this money, because we're already funding it up front, it is, revenue earned, through the services we're providing. The state will continue to look at actual cost of overall services, make sure that our rates are logical, they're based on cost and everything else. And, once we earn these money and put these contract increases into your contract, there is no restriction to this enhanced funding, what it has to be used for. You have the complete flexibility, like any other dollar in your contract, consistent with eligible supported housing or housing expenses, to do increases, bonuses, and support your program. You guys are making the choice on that. Cynthia Stewart, is the drop-down list we just saw the complete list of services? Do you know the answer to that?
I think so, although it's possible the screenshot didn't capture everything. But again, I'll mention there is an other services category on there. So if you think something is missing, it can be captured within the other services category.
No. Michelle, will all contact types be added to care, such as phone calls? Or will only contact types include face-to-face and telehealth? So the way the state plan is designed, it only applies to face-to-face and telehealth. So phone calls aren't included. We understand that you may use phone calls as a very effective way to provide supports to tenants. And you may choose to still document that pursuant to the standards in your records. But yeah, you won't have to report phone calls in CARES. Did I get that right, Julie?
Yes.
Okay. So anonymous attendee, can the $1,200 per unit awarded in January be can the $1,200 awarded in lump sum be carried over? I think that's the question that was answered before, and we will work to ensure that you have time to use those funds. So we'll try to clarify the guidance on that and ensure that that you have the opportunity to use those funds. What prompted the state to afford supported housing program this financial enhancement opportunity? So this entire opportunity is based on the fact that New York State has been a leader in supporting supported housing for decades. And when we started studying this and engaging with the federal government and CMS, we realized other states had supported housing waivers or supported housing state plans that covered tenancy supports. And we submitted a SPA 2 years ago with CMS support and approval. And the process we've been working on is trying to make sure we have a framework to get this data and start drawing down a federal match on the eligible supports we're providing. So what's happened over the last 2 years is really a framework to enable us to move forward, which included really substantial feedback from the Shinny team and from ACL to ensure that this is voluntary, to ensure that the providers aren't the ones doing the billing and taking the risk, because these programs can't take on more risk. And the state now in this last budget had money added so that we can start seeding these contract increases well before we even draw down a penny here. So we're trying to implement our budget here where we have the investment to start seeding all this startup. And we're very excited about this enhancement opportunity. So, consistent with the question that I think you're asking. Another anonymous attendee, and who will be responsible for inputting the demographic information to care? So that's something that provider agencies already do. You guys are submitting information even before this effort on who is placed in a bed, admission, discharge, and what we've done in CARES is expanded information on monthly service delivery. And I think our sense is that most providers have experts on CARES, they're entering the data, and the challenge that the providers have to do as we work on implementing this is to have a process to take your services data and the information your staff on the front lines are putting into your service plans and entering that into CARES. And we think that that's probably going to be the same experts that currently do CARES data, potentially adding some additional capacity, get that done. Are HRA funded programs eligible as well? So if it's a DOH program under OMH and OMH has a connection to it at this time, they are eligible. If it's beyond OMH or a purely city funded program not connected to OMH, they're not eligible at this time, but we will be working with DOH and the other housing agencies to see if this can be expanded for additional enhancements. So OMH is probably the largest funder of housing. We know that as providers, you have portfolios that may include other programs beyond OMH, but we're starting with OMH. We're going to get this process working and hopefully work with other agencies to get some more going as well when we're ready. Why is the funding not, okay, so John, why is the funding not directly connected to the exact number of contacts provided as it is with the licensed program who provide billable contacts? Does the amount of money OMH receives from this program vary based on the number of contacts we provide? More money for the services, or is a set amount per unit per year similar to what OMH is giving us? Okay, so you can read the state plan, all that information is out there very clearly. We are billing a monthly rate. So the reason why it's a uniform amount that we're giving you is because of all the feedback from the field on the importance of making this voluntary, on the importance of not changing the service delivery, on the importance of not adding risk to these programs. So because of the construct of how this is set up, where OMH is the entity billing, it's completely delinked from a provider having incentive, and we don't think that's a bad thing. We actually think it's a very positive thing, because one of the key feedbacks we heard from Shinny and ACL is you don't want to change the nature of the services. We don't want to change the incentives of who gets in or how much services someone receives. So it is a monthly case payment. If someone gets a service in a month, the state is billing. As I said, the state's going to show the field all the billing data we have here and all the revenue we're collecting here. So the amount of money that we're receiving overall for this effort is getting poured back in to support these increases. And as we look at the increases that we've done, if there's more money to increase those further, we will be doing that. So I think that there's a good chance that those rates may go up. And we have had comments that why is the upstate only $600? So that rate very well could go up. So yeah, I think all your questions that you asked, John, relate to how this is set up. And this is set up based on tremendous feedback from the community. So all of you helped to ensure that this is set up in a responsible way. And we get that when you flip around those questions and start asking, well, why don't we have an incentive? Why can't we provide more units? When you start going down that road, then you start taking ownership for all the negatives as well. So the way that other Medicaid programs have worked in the past is that the state has assumed you were going to have a certain amount of billing, and then the state has cut contract money that currently exists, 50 cents on the dollar, and said, okay, go get your job done, bill state Medicaid. It was very clear based on the feedback that we were given, and the fact that the state's investing a lot of other money in these programs, that we didn't want to add instability here. So I hope that answers your question. Michelle, is this also applicable to OMH congregate treatment community residences? The answer to that is no. We already have a program in OMH congregate treatment residences where if you are a CR participating in the Medicaid program, you're billing a Medicaid rate, whether it's an apartment treatment or a congregate program, if you're in an eligible setting. And so we already bill for rehab services there. That's billed on a monthly rate, and you're familiar with that. If you're in a congregate program that isn't Medicaid eligible, you're getting state aid for those services, and there's no ability to bill for tenancy supports. You're in a congregate setting, not in independent living, getting tenancy support. So the answer to that is no. John, what information about this billing do we need to explain to our residents? Do we need additional consent form from them? That's a great question. We've had some conversations with our attorneys on them. Obviously, when they've agreed to be in supported housing, they understood the nature of the program, and the residents understand that they're getting supports, to help them in housing. And I don't think you have an obligation to provide anything further to the residents. You're already engaging and providing services to them that they are willingly accepting and obviously wanting or agreeing to. Or so, Julie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the only instance where you may need a consent might be if you are farming out the LPHA recommendation, but our counsel's office is looking into that, and we'll have a definitive answer on that shortly. But otherwise, no, you wouldn't need any additional consents.
Okay, so, and for Michelle, will CARES entry ask for date and service only, or time of service, place of service, type of services? So I think CARES will ask for date and type of service. I don't think it asked for time
Nope.
or place of service.
Nope,
that
just the date and the service category.
And the service category. Okay, so Cynthia, I am not seeing on the attestation form a place to clarify number of units want to enroll and in which programs. Thanks for pointing that out. I think we were debating in the issuance of that. We wanted to keep the form simple. And I think, you know, as you submit it in your transmittal, you can add that details if you're going with partial. So yeah, you can definitely add that detail consistent with what we're explaining to everyone. Thanks, Cynthia. Anonymous, is the first training provided on Medicaid billing? I had asked a question if a service can be billed if a resident goes to the hospital the same day. Okay, so is the first training provided on Medicaid billing? So again, you are not doing the billing. Can a service be provided if a resident goes to the hospital the same day? It's a great question. I know we have different rules with different programs. But if a person was in their apartment and you did provide a tenancy support to that individual, even if they went to the hospital later and were admitted and are now in an Article 28 setting, yeah, right now with this framework, we could still bill that monthly visit. That is a question we will raise to our attorneys. We get why many of you ask these questions, because depending on the mechanics of the program, like ACT, we have rules like that. So we'll make sure that Jessica Eber, our attorney, understands that question. If we think more guidance has to be clarified, we'll add some to the support housing materials. But yeah, if you provided a tenancy support, you know, to a client on a given day, and somehow they were admitted that night, you know, and you report the record of that tenancy billing, we can bill. Will OMH have access to see if a resident went to the hospital so they can decide if it's billable? All right, so that we will look into that. But we're asking for you to just submit when you're providing those contacts. And we do have access to ultimately all billable services, both through managed care or Medicaid fee-for-service. So we do have the ability to see that if for some reason the answer is you can't bill for both. Okay, Jason, how long should the service be provided to the client? Is there a set time limit that needs to be conducted? And the answer to that is there is no set time limit. You guys are currently providing supports. They probably vary significantly in time. And I don't think the supported housing guidelines define a minimum time limit. We believe that you're providing supports consistent with what the client needs, that there may be variation based on the actual visit, what you're providing, you know, the situation. And so we don't dictate a minimum amount of time. Is that accurate, Julie?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So this anonymous attendee is very active here. I have noticed some conflicting guidance between the two presentations on getting LPHA for residents who do not have Medicaid. One presentation said that we should get LPHA recommendation for all residents in the program we opt in. The other presentation said we should only get LPHE recommendation for residents who have Medicaid. I believe, as it's a great question, especially if we're saying it differently in two places. I think our intent is we want you to get the LPHA recommendation regardless. You often may not know whether or not a person has Medicaid. A person's Medicaid status may change down the road. We are paying the $90 for the LPHA recommendation, you know, to basically evaluate the need and confirm that. And yeah, we're not asking you on the front end to confirm or know whether or not your clients have Medicaid. Many of you may have that insight, which we appreciate, but some of you may not. And we're not trying to add that additional workload onto you. We will pay for an LPHA recommendation for any residents that you do it. And if for some reason they don't have Medicaid, I think that's fine. Is that accurate, Julie?
I mean, I defer to you on that. If you want them getting them all, even if they don't have Medicaid, that's fine with me.
Well, what I'm nervous about is if there are clients that as a provider, you may believe they don't have Medicaid, and then you're not conducting an LPHA, and it's not a bad step to have anyway.
Mhm.
Extra confirmation that there's a need for tenancy supports. It's fine if they don't have Medicaid. At least we know that our process is working. We're going to be integrating it, to the SPOA at some point, and it's just helpful to know. Okay,
That's
anonymous, can guidance from Medicaid be released on the standards they are wanting to see when considering a serviceable billable unit or not? I understand that aging provider is not responsible for billing Medicaid. OMH assumes responsibility, but OMH is technically billing for a service they have never seen. They only seen a code that is inputted. For ethical reasons, could the minimum criteria for a billable service be released so that providers have better understanding ahead of time what is being considered billable versus non-billable? So you absolutely have it correct. You are attesting to us that you provided a service on a specific date. The services that you saw described are defined in the state plan, and they match the PowerPoint that we sent. So you are literally seeing the language of all the services that are allowed. And that is in our supported housing guidelines now. And when we do the training in December, we can clearly give you some examples of what we think are appropriate. And clearly on any claim, when we claim for a billable service, clearly on any claim, if there will be audits down the road. OIG will come in and audit the program, and that's fine. That's actually a great government protection to make sure things are working properly. OMH will probably go and do audits to make sure that we're submitting good, accurate claims. And that will involve us sitting there saying, oh, do you have a service plan? Are you fulfilling our supported housing guidelines? Do you have some notes, as Julie explained? But nowhere in the state plan or any of that guidance out there do we sit there and define the absolute minimum criteria, right? That's not the way. If you look at our PROS regs, you look at our PROS programs, you look at our CR regs and our CR programs, what you're seeing here for this rehab service is comparable and similar to every other rehab services out there, including not just services in the mental health field, but also services in the healthcare field. So I get that you're very interested in understanding as much as possible on what constitutes a billable unit. A billable unit is what we just showed you. The services that Julie described, the definitions that we described, and you guys understand that. We're going to do training on it. We're showing you it. We're going to talk about it. And as you do your service plans, and as you do your actual contacts with the individuals, if you don't believe that your interaction and your tenancy supports that you're providing meet those criteria, do not report it in that criteria. Report it in another category as something that's ineligible. So yeah, you have an obligation in reporting, an ethical obligation, as you're pointing out, to make sure that you understand what these services are. And again, a lot of these services, they're tenancy supports that you've been providing for decades. But you have an obligation to understand what these tenancy supports are. And when you tell us in CARES on a monthly basis to ensure that you've provided these services, we don't define the absolute minimum. We don't define that it's 1 minute of interaction. And that's something that we will go through examples. We'll have more discussions and training. But I think you're seeing the essence and the bulk of all of this, and it's the same for any area of medicine or OMH services.
I do just want to add, we posted the link to the state plan amendment on our website. So if you really want to see the actual language yourself, you can do so. It's on the OMH website.
Yeah, it's all in there, and everything you're seeing in these PowerPoints matches that. So if you read the supported housing guidelines and you read the state plan, which is the state's legal document of what services are covered, it is very similar to all the other definitions and services out there for rehab supports and other areas of medicine. And our guidelines drive it, our state plan drives it, and we do think it's pretty clear. And when you ask, what is the minimum? We're not going to sit there and define, it's 1 minute, it's 2 minutes. We're not going to do that.
Hi, I just want to
If you guys have, if you want to come back to us with specific examples of, sometimes we do a support that only includes X, Y, Z, and we think it may be this. If you want to work with Shinny to give us 20 of those examples, we'll respond to them and react what we would advise. But we're not gonna, tell us what you're grappling with, and we will respond. But we're not gonna start sitting there defining services beyond what the standard is for all of healthcare and medicine.
I just want to flag that and I want to make sure to be cognizant of your time and our attendees' time. So I just want to close this out and say a huge thank you to Emil, Julie, Lynn. Thank you so much for answering I don't know, 85 questions, 100, something like that. That was amazing. Really, really appreciate your time. Thank you everyone for joining us.